Hello, Skye Taylor here. Let me just sit down here. I'm going to have a cup of coffee, and guess what? I got a cup of coffee for you too. We're going to sit back and we're going to talk. Let me push this over for you. Feel free to slurp. Some of the questions I get, I would like to answer maybe in a video because I feel it's a little bit more personal. One question I got in particular was from a person that wanted to know, Skye, I'm just starting out painting. I want to know if I can use house paints to paint a painting with. Well, the answer is absolutely yes, you can. Yes, you can use house paints. What kind of house paints do you want to use? Well, I would say you would want to use a latex acrylic, and you'd probably want to get an exterior paint. That would probably be the best. And if you do buy the paint, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive to buy the little quarts of it, the latex, but you want to do that starting out because you don't know whether you're going to like it or not. Painting with house paints is a whole different animal than painting with tube paints. What happens is that the house paint tends to be a little bit more watery. So it's a whole different way of painting. You have to make an adjustment. If you're used to painting with tube paints, trying to paint with house paint is an adjustment. And it might take a while to get used to it, the flow and the consistency of it. What's the difference between house paint and the paint that you buy? Well, the artist grade paint. Well, the artist grade paint is usually thicker and it has more pigments to it. The more you pay for it, if you buy golden, you're getting a lot of pigments. House paint doesn't seem to have as much pigment, although visually, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. I know I'm going to get arguments about that, but believe me, it's true. So you can get some really good house paint. So what you want to do is you want to buy exterior satin. Why do you want to buy exterior? Well, just a minute, folks. I'll tell you in a second. Exterior house paint has UV protection in it. So it's probably a little bit better than interior paint. Although interior paint will hold up for a long time, exterior paint with the UV protections in it will even be better. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from people saying, oh, Skye, you're crazy, you can't paint with house paint. Let me tell you a little secret. Back in 1951, Jackson Pollock painted a painting with house paints. And believe me, folks, the house paints back then are nowhere near the quality that they are today. Recently, that painting sold at auction for $50 million, and it was house paint, and it was the biggest selling painting ever, and it was house paint. So who's to say you can't paint with house paint? Yes, you can. If that works for you, the bottom line is the end result. Does it look good? Are you happy with it? The colors and that. It's the end result, the visual picture. The people nobody's going to question you and say, well, what kind of paint did you use? No regular person. It's the bottom line, what it really looks like. Now, after you do the house paint, if you decide to go that route, you'll want to varnish it. Now, I have a video on how to varnish a painting. You'll want to try that varnish. After it dries, you want to always let your painting dry about 2 weeks if you can possibly do it, because pigments they're still settling. But in an emergency, use a hair dryer. That'll speed up the process. But if you're doing abstracts and that, sometimes if you do a hair dryer on it, you could splash the paint, especially if you're using with house paint. It's not as thick, so you can push it across the canvas with a hair dryer. So be careful. If you do a painting you actually love, you don't want to use a hair dryer on it. You want to let it try to dry if you possibly can, because it is thinner paint, and yes, you can move it. So you want to buy small cans to start. They're going to cost you more money, but you want to test it to see if it's going to be good. And Here's a little secret too. If you decide to go that way and you really like the way the painting is working for you and you're happy with that type of paint, it's got to be latex satin. You'll want to go into the paint stores and check for mist tints. Yep, mist tints. Sometimes they'll have cans of paint, a gallon of it for like 10 or 12 bucks, which might be $30 normally for the gallon. So if you can find a color in satin latex, a mist tint, you're in business. Sometimes you can get by with a flat. You could get by with a flat because you're going to varnish it. But I would stay, if I could get it's interior or exterior, whatever you could get. And yes, you can mix them. And can you mix house paint with artist paints, acrylic paints that you buy? Yes, you can. They will mix. You can mix it. It's latex. It'll mix. So if you wanted to go that route, you could. That's a possibility. Yes, you can mix it. So now this opens up a whole wide world of colors to you. You could go into your paint store and pick out a color and have them mix it for you. And you can have unbelievable colors. You could do that if you wanted to do that. And they will mix. And sometimes if you find a tint or something that's maybe a tint maybe that you're not particularly fond of, maybe a color, you could always use it as a base coat. In other words, when you do your painting, before you do your painting, you could put this down as a coat and then paint over it. You could do that if you wanted to. Which leads me to the next question that I got. Skye, I want to know, when do I gesso? What do I do when I gesso? Do I need to gesso for acrylic paints? Well, the answer is no, you don't have to. You do not have to gesso a canvas if you're painting in acrylic. Why? Well, acrylic paints have no acidic properties to them. So in other words, if you paint on a canvas, a raw canvas with acrylic paint, there's no acidic properties to eat away the fibers. So you could just paint a coat with acrylic paint and then paint on top of it, or you could paint directly on the raw canvas. It makes no difference. It's not going to make a difference. However, if you paint in oil paints, absolutely you must gesso the canvas. You must put at least 3 coats on, and you'll have to read the instructions. There's probably videos on how to gesso. But yes, you would have to, because oil paints have acidic properties. Another question. Can you mix oil paints and acrylic paints? Absolutely not. You can't mix them. They do not go together. So you can't, I can't understand these artists that say that their paintings are acrylic and oil. I don't see how that could possibly be, unless you're putting down an acrylic base. But technically, acrylic and oils don't mix. You can't put oil paint down and put acrylic on. It will come off. And you can't put acrylic down and put oil on top of it. It just doesn't seem to work. So I don't understand why some artists do that. And the reason why some artists will sell a painting and say, oh, it's oil and acrylic, because they want to try to get their painting in both avenues. Because oil paints have a better perceived value than acrylic paint. In other words, an artist can get a little bit more money if he paints in oil. They seem to have a more perceived value. So they'll lie and say, oh yeah, we paint with acrylic and oil. But I don't see how you can do it. I personally don't. And I've read and I've researched it, and all the big companies say absolutely not. You can't do it. So I'm going to take their word for it. I've mixed many medias together, and it's acrylic and oil don't mix. I don't see how you could do it, but whatever. So I'm hoping that this helped you a little bit, and the main thing is to get out there and paint. It doesn't matter what kind of paints you use. Just get out there and create. And whether it's house paint or the finest artist paint you can buy. But if you're just starting out, house paints ain't a bad way to go. It ain't a bad way to go, my friend. Because it doesn't cost you a lot of money, and you get a lot of paint. You can get a lot of paint. So you can experiment when you're first starting out, and who knows, that might be your paint of choice. Who knows? But anyways, oh, you didn't drink your coffee and it's getting cold. Well, here you go. You didn't think I was going to let you drink it, did you? Well, this is Skye Taylor. I hope that I answered a couple of the questions that were posed to me. Like I say, this is very informal. We're sitting in our kitchen, we're having coffee, and I'm just hoping that maybe I helped you a little bit and maybe fired off something in your mind. Maybe you want to try house paints. Whatever. Well, Skye Taylor, and we'll be talking again soon. We'll do another couple more videos. I'll try to answer some questions over videos, and hopefully it'll give you a few tips and a few tricks. God bless you, and thank you very much for watching. I'm going to drink your coffee, too. Thank you. Bye. Good stuff. Too bad you didn't know what you were missing. Heck, maybe next time you could bring some donuts. Like I need them. Cheers.
The end.